Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we're going to cover assessments with Head of Product, Mark Schuster. He's going to go through all the ins and outs and all the cool things you can do with CYPHER assessments to get the results and set up the kind of engagement that you want. If you have any questions at all, please drop them into the Q&A box. That helps us track the questions and helps us download them later for reference over the chat. And otherwise, we look forward to hearing what you have to say. We look forward to seeing what Mark has to say. This was a user requested topic, and we're looking forward to hearing more requests. So if you get to the end of this and think, you know what, I'd really like to learn more about, drop that in the Q&A as well. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mark and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. So as Caitlin mentioned, we're going to take a look at assessments today and look at how we can make assessments more useful, looking at the results of the assessments and taking actions based on those. So I'm going to look at a number of different aspects of our assessment functionality in the platform and then what you can do with that. So some of this will start off with a basic quiz, and then we'll move into some of the more advanced assessment types and advanced grading types as we go through this afternoon's session. So I'm going to start off again with a basic quiz assessment. What, as learning practitioners, we spend a lot of time on with an online assessment. And I'm going to use a course here called Best Practices for Corporate Imagery. And this is a course that was created with our CYPHER Agent course creation tool. I had the tool create an entire course for me and add in different quizzes throughout the process. So we'll take a look at some of that and then how we can utilize that information. So I'm going to start off looking at the assessments in this course, and we're going to take a look at a quiz at the end of the first module on an introduction to corporate imagery best practices. So this is all pretty standard. CYPHER Agent generated all of the instructions, all of the quiz questions for me based on my requirements. And we're going to take a look at some of the quiz questions that were created. So when I do that, I can go into an individual question. I can see all of the different weighting that was in there. And then I can see that it has tags that have been added into it. That's going to be useful to us later as we're looking at reusing questions. And then the ability to add in skills that are tied to that particular question. So CYPHER Agent does all of this automatically for me. If I'm manually creating a question, I can do the same thing by going in and simply choosing the skills that are associated with that question based on the skills that the course is associated with. So in this case, CYPHER Agent's already taken care of that for me, so I don't need to worry about that. So we're going to head back over to the questions as they sit there. So other things that we can look at. One of the key things, of course, is how this assessment is graded. So this is a 10-question quiz. And for this assessment, I have it set as a standard pass-fail. I have a minimum percentage of 70% correct in order to get a passing grade on this quiz. I can always select other grading scales. We have built in a standard pass-fail as well as a letter grade type setup. But if I want to, I can also just create my own. So it can be based on percentage based or letter grade type as well. And I can create any of those and set those as default settings across my entire platform. I think 70% is pretty generous. In many cases, we see it set at 80% or something, but we'll leave it at that 70% for right now. Once we've got all of our scoring set up and all of that pass fail, the next thing that we can look at is creating things with score rules. So this allows me to take action based on what a learner has done in the assessment. So I can go in now and say, if the assessment is less than 70%, so in which case They failed the assessment. I can now add actions to take on that. So common things that we see are hiding modules or showing modules. So that allows me to create prescriptive learning. If someone failed the assessment that's on a particular topic, I may want them to be required to take an additional module on that content to make sure that it's covered for them. We can also show an additional assessment so that they can retake some of that content down the way. We can also, of course, do other types of things. We're probably not going to award badges for failing an assessment, but if you set it up as, say, someone received a perfect score, you could award a badge, or you could award points in a game for getting that perfect score on there. We have integrations, being able to send webhooks out to external applications to notify the application. Say someone received a score that met the requirements to gain access to another system that the training is on, or as well using XAPI to provide information to a learning record store. We can add people or remove them to a group, or we could enroll them in a course. So again, if we're using that more prescriptive learning approach and someone failed an assessment on a particular topic, we can enroll them, assign them to take an additional course on that area rather than having them take modules in the current course. So that is all flexible to do as well. And then we have a lot of additional general functionality like adding tags to users, adding to-do items to remind them to complete something that is necessary based on their assessment results. We can send notifications. All of that is available through our standard automation functionalities. So other things that we can look at associated here, let's take a look at the scoring and what's here. I can see that there are 3 learners that are enrolled in this course right now, and I can see 2 of them have completed the assessment. So I can certainly take a look. I can see all of the details on what they answered. I can go see that submission, see every question and answer that they were given as we go through that. I can see the history of how many times they completed that assessment. And then we can also look and see, oh, do we need to override the grade for some reason? We can do that as well. We can add comments on the assessment. So all of that is available as an instructor or an administrator to be able to go through. The same thing for Travis here, who failed the assessment. I can go through and see all of his information. If I need to adjust his grade based on perhaps I had an error in the assessment when I look through this and I can see that actually should have been correct, I can make those adjustments. While in this case, he still failed the assessment, I can quickly update those in the platform as the instructor or administrator as well. Finally, once I've got all of that, I do have analytics where I can start to look at what the distribution of scores is. So I can see all of that. And then I can look at each individual question that's in there and look at the item analysis on what is correct, what's not, how often those results are being chosen, and use that information to inform my decisions as an instructional designer to say, 50% of people are choosing this particular item for as a distractor in that question. Perhaps I need to adjust some of that language to be able to correct this and have a better response to the content. So that is a very high level overview of a quiz. We're going to take a look at actually creating one rather than using the pre-built assessment. Caitlin, do we have any questions that we need to address before that?
Yes, we do have from Katie. If you change the number of attempts on that same part where you can override score, will it auto reset and allow the learner to go back in through their dashboard?
So we're referring to over here. So attempts, max attempts. So all of that we can edit on an individual basis. So say there was a technical issue, and in this case, there is a maximum attempts of one on this quiz. So I can then go in and give that person another attempt and save it. And yes, that will then allow them to go back in through the spot in the course or through the assessments option in the course.
Okay, that was the only question we had so far.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, we've got these assessments that are created by CYPHER Agent in this particular course, and we can see there are four of these. If I go into my modules, I can see there are five modules. And to make it a little bit easier to see, we'll look at this in a list view. And you can see we've got a quiz at the end of each module as we go through that. But what I've done is, rather than having a quiz on the key takeaways, I want to have an assessment that is truly a final assessment at the end of the last module. So I'm going to go into that module and I'm now going to add an additional quiz at the end that is going to be my final assessment. So we're going to call this just a final assessment. For the sake of time, I'm not going to walk through all of the instructions that I want to type in for the final assessment, but you have the full ability to do that. As you can see, I can control everything here. And as we just talked about, Katie, with the number of attempts, that is, of course, customizable. Right now, this one is set at one. I could make it an unlimited number of attempts or give someone two attempts at it. All of that is available as we go through there. I can set categories for the type of assessment it is, grading scale, whether it's a normal or if there is something that is not graded for a knowledge check going through the middle of a course. The grading scale, I'm using the standard pass-fail grading scale, which is set up as my default anyway on this site, but you can change that for each individual assessment as you go through. And then there are, of course, additional options that are available, whether scores are released instantly or whether they're released by the instructor manually. You can do timed assessments here, whether the feedback is given instantly, whether I use the latest score or best score, a variety of additional options for feedback, randomization options, review before submission, allowing jumping between questions. All of those different functions are available here. I'm going to leave these at the basic requirements here, and we're going to go ahead and start building out our assessment. So obviously the first and most important part of this is going to be the questions that go into it. So I can manually add in the questions, but what I know from what we've just gone through is I have knowledge checks at the end of each of the three primary content modules that are there. So I have those set as question banks. So I'm going to go in and from my library of question banks, I'm going to go ahead and select those question banks and add them in to this assessment. So that allows me to save a lot of time building out questions. And as you know, it's a pretty normal practice that you've got practice quizzes as you go through. And then there are a variety of other questions that can be added in at the final assessment time. So we're going to take each of those three question banks from these three modules, and then I could add additional banks as well or additional questions as we go through it. But when we look at that, there's a number of options that we can change here. So you see by default, all questions in the bank are selected. So I'm going to change that. I don't want everyone to see every question. By using question banks, I'm able to use a random selection of questions from that bank of questions. So in this case, we're going to do, we'll say three questions from each of these question banks. So it will pull three randomly from the bank of 10. If I want to adjust that further, I can also go in, and as we saw, each of those questions is tied to a skill. So I can say from this question bank, I only want questions on brand consistency. So I can specify that to make sure that I address and get all of my different skills that need to be tested at the end of a course covered. So I'm able to select that way. I'm also able to select from tags. So as we saw, each of those questions had tags created there. So then we go through, add all of the tags. Perhaps we tag in the question bank, these are final assessment questions, and we can search for only those questions out of the question bank. So you have a lot of flexibility using the skills and tags to control which questions are coming in out of a question bank and provide that true randomized assessment option. In this case, I'm going to let it go ahead and just select the random three. And you can see we now get 3 questions at 1 point per question. I can do the same thing with each of the other modules as I go through here. Now, one thing I could do if I want to weight the impact of images module more, I can say that questions from this question bank are worth double the points. So that now gives them extra weight as it goes through. Once I've done all of that, I've now got my ability to create this truly randomized final assessment from everything that's there. All of these same options are here. Obviously, I'm not going to have any scores yet since we just created this assessment. So we can see nothing has been submitted. I'll have nothing on analytics side yet, but I can go in, double check, make sure all of my skills are there. I can make sure that I adjust the amount of time for completion. What's the minimum score requirement to be considered complete? Are there time estimates for how long this assessment takes? Same thing with the score rules that I looked at earlier. Rather than building a manual score rule, I can say when this assessment is considered complete. Same thing. I've got all of these different actions that can be taken, same actions that we looked at earlier, based on just a completion with a successful score there. So that creates my assessment. I have that final assessment that can now be used. I can add tags to this particular assessment if I want to find it later. Same as we saw with question banks, I can always import an assessment from elsewhere in the platform or elsewhere in the course. So I can add tags to find that easily. That gives you a lot of flexibility to control your assessments as you go through. Before I move into other assessment types, Caitlin, do we have any additional questions that we need to address?
Yeah, Jeremy asks, if you are pulling questions from the question bank, can you select a certain number but make one question mandatory so everyone gets it?
So you certainly could add tags for mandatory and require that, but specifying at that level, what you would normally do is do 2 question banks and have one that has mandatory questions and one that has optional questions. So that gives you the ability to control the by doing it that way, you make sure that that 1 question bank that has, say, there are 2 mandatory questions is always pulled in.
One more question from Tanisha Howard. Can assessments be archived?
So as far as archiving the assessment, I assume you're referring to after completion of the course. We would archive at a course level normally for that. So that would be the approach to take to actually remove it from the course. It's to remove it from the platform. If you just wanted to not have an assessment be required anymore as part of a course, that is where you would go in and change the visibility rules on this and change that to a hidden assessment so it's no longer required or shown as part of the course. Then you'd be able to come back to it and still see results, but it would be hidden from the view of participants and not required in the course any longer.
Awesome. All right, that was the last one on this section.
Okay, great. So we're going to take a look at some of the other types of assessments that are available. And we're going to switch up our courses here, and we're going to go into a course on Photoshop as we go through here. So when we're adding in assessments, there are plenty of different options that are available to us. So we have the ability to do a Dropbox assessment, which would be submitting an outside document. So say you have someone write up a paper in the terms of academia, being able to upload your Word document or PDF to be reviewed and graded later. We have essays. We'll take a look at that one here in just a moment. We have SCORM-based quizzes. We have surveys. And then we get into group projects, so group debates that are voted on, group discussions where points are earned for participation, and team projects. So those are all different types of assessments that are available in the platform. Now, in my case, I want to look first off at what a SCORM assessment looks like. So if I take a course that was created in SCORM as a standalone assessment, I have that built into this course. The particular assessment that I'm creating is a very simple two-question assessment that was built in Articulate Rise to use its functionality and graded via SCORM. So that is all available here. You can see it is a very simple package that has not much to it. Once I create this, this will play in a SCORM player within the course. I have plenty of different options to edit it and go through everything else. All of that information from SCORM is then returned back to our platform. So when I look at my assessment results here, I can see that one of these students has completed this SCORM result. So same thing I can see, he passed it. This particular course has a grading scale with a letter grade. He passed with 100% of those two questions. Depending on the SCORM authoring tool, there are options to see the results that were provided by the SCORM authoring tool. Since SCORM does not require that, it's going to be dependent on the authoring tool that you use to create it. And each one is going to be slightly different in how they display assessment results. So if I take a look at the results here, you can see there were two questions on here, and this is what is returned to our platform from an Articulate Rise course. Not always the most user-friendly to see, but I can see that the first question, Tony Bratt here responded true. The correct answer was true, so he was correct on that particular assessment. Same thing with question number 2. Again, just like with an assessment within our platform, I do have the ability to go in and override that grade if there is an issue. Once I go in there, and I can simply edit the grade here, I can add comments to the record for it as well, perhaps noting why I changed the grade or something along those lines. So the SCORM assessment is a good way to pull in outside tools that may have other types of things that are not available within our platform. If you want to use a particular type of simulation, for example, that supports SCORM, we can pull all of that into our platform using the SCORM assessment type. The other type of assessment that I want to look at is an essay assessment. And you can see I've got an essay assessment already built into this course as well, where it's asking for an essay to be written based on how to use colors. An essay by itself can be useful, of course, to have a free-form answer that's then reviewed by the instructor and go through and provide a score based on it. One of the other things that can be done is to utilize this to not just have text, but other options. So if I choose to view this as a learner, so I can now see as a learner, I get my instructions to write an essay on how to use colors. And when I go in to prepare my answer, I get a full text editor that's here, but our text editor also has other options. So let's say, for example, your course is on presentation skills, and rather than providing an offline type of assessment where you need to review something that they've presented, you can do all of that through the essay question type. So if I go in here, I can choose a record video. And you can see that it's now got my camera here and allows me to tie the camera into this, record the video, and upload that into here as my essay. So this gives you a virtual role play type environment or virtual presentation type environment. The same thing can be done with audio for a call center environment, perhaps. So you can have a multiple options besides text that can be used. Once this is submitted, someone creates everything, submits for grading. All of that then goes back to the instructor to be able to view and grade. So all of that would then show up in my submissions, would show up on a submissions to grade, and I can then provide that grade just as I could. My apologies, that wrong one there. I can go in and manually add that grade in once I review the submission that would be present here. So that gives us a good overview of essays and SCORM assessment types. Caitlin, do we have any questions on assessment types before I go into the last one, which will be a rubric assessment?
Not on that, but we did have one latecomer about quizzes saying if we create a quiz and people take the quiz and later something changes and a question and or answer needs to be updated, can we change that question without previous scores being affected?
Yes, the previous scores will not be affected. So when you make the change to it, the score will still be as recorded for that learner. You can manually adjust the score for that learner if that is the case and it was an incorrect question, for example, and you want to give them credit for it. But if you change number of questions, for example, you add 5 more questions in, the previous grading will never be affected. So that is always stable for it.
Okay, was all for now.
All right, so we're going to go in for one last, we're going to go into our Adobe Illustrator course now. And we're going to take a look at this one that is an offline assessment that is an observation. There are many ways you could use the rubrics that we're going to look at, but in my particular use case, we're going to add in an offline assessment, which is going to be an instructor observation. So we're going to create an instructor observation of core Illustrator techniques. So same thing, I can go in, I can make any of these additional changes that I want to, same options are available. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and save this. And since this is a graded assessment, not a quiz that would be automatically graded online, we have a new option up here, which is use rubric. So with this, we're able to pull in an observational rubric that gives criteria for the instructor to use when grading the assessment. So I'm going to go into my library and I've already created a behavioral observation rubric that has some core features in there that we can use and reuse as we go through. In this particular case, there are 3 different criteria and a different guidance for what the behavior I'm looking for is. So I can certainly go in here and I can add more descriptions such as file creation, whatever I want to add into each one. I can provide additional information to the instructor for does not display. So they do not display the behavior that's there. I can provide an example of what that means of does not display. I've created this basic template to use, but then you can add that additional description to create a true rubric that can be used to have an impartial view of what is learned in a course. So once I do that, I can add all of that in there. You can see that gets added in. This is now tied to that particular set. But what I want to do is also look at how this ties into skills and mastery rating. So we have a variety of different skills that are associated with this course. So I'm going to go back in to edit this again. And for each one of these observable criteria, I can now go in and add a competency. And that's going to be our skills and mastery ratings for that particular area. So again, this was for core Illustrator techniques. So this is going to be our 3 skills here. So for each one of these, I'm going to tie that observation to one of those behaviors and competencies that we want to rate based on this. So I've done that. We can see there's a little green check here that shows me, okay, this one has a competency associated with it. I can hover over, see what that is. All of that is ready to go. And then I'm going to go over and start looking at scores. So in this case, I've got my 3 learners here that we can see. These have not been scored yet. So if I am the instructor, I am observing our friend Tony again here. And when I go in, while it's a little bit difficult to read here based on the rubric, I can move that around. I can see I've got all of those criteria. And once I've reviewed this with Tony, I've observed him, I go through my checklist and I say, okay, he can successfully display sometimes, he excels at this, and he's able to apply here. So once I do that, it will create a score for the rubric basis and provide all of that information there. I can also then quickly go to my next learner. So I can go to Troy, and I'm able to, same thing, see the rubric. Hey, Troy did great. Everything is good. He scored perfectly on there. So I can go through each one of those and be able to provide that information. So now, because I've tied all of this rubric-based scoring into skills, I can go over to my mastery view. I can see these are the skills that are associated with this course. But then I can go in and see the association with those individual learners and coverage. Once I've done that, we can then set up rules based on that. So whether the skills are associated within a quiz and we receive that, or whether they're associated with the mastery level from a rubric, we can now say, all right, so if competency, advanced selection, and object manipulation has a rating above 80%. So that is what I have set as my mastery level. So it would show green. I can say, all right, if there is 80% on there, then I want to take an action. So just as we said with all of the quiz questions and scores on a quiz, being able to hide modules, show modules, award badges, notify an outside system, all of those same actions are available this way. So when we go back to all of our skills there, this then allows us to provide controls of what modules are shown, what modules are hidden, based on mastery levels of skills rather than just a generic score. So by using the skills and mastery, tying those into quiz questions, tying them into the rubric as we've done here, we can control all of that and create the prescriptive learning based off of skill level rather than a quiz question or score itself. And then we can, again, do all of these same things, enroll them in other courses. Say our skill mastery level is below 50%. We can say you need to take another course that's in this particular skill. So that gives you the ability to use those various scoring types to then tie it into skill mastery, and get to a much more granular level with your adaptive learning. So that is my overview of all of our assessment types and how to work with the scoring and administrative to make this more controllable for you. Caitlin, do we have any other questions that have come in? Or if you have a question, you want to add it into the Q&A now, we're happy to answer any other questions as well.
Yeah, no more questions have come in. So like I said, if you do have one, please do drop it into the Q&A for us. If you have any ideas on future Cypher Lives, let us know as well. Okay, no more questions have come in. Mark, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to add?
I would just add, looking through assessments, this is always, an area where there's opportunities for improvements in how we operate as learning practitioners. Uh, Being able to use things like CYPHER Agent to dynamically generate questions based on your content is a truly huge opportunity to create assessments that are more challenging, but also more accurate as you go through. And one of the things I always struggled with as a learning practitioner, I managed a product training group, and we had 10 people in each location, and you've got this required training you need to take. So answers would always get shared, all of that type of concern. So it gives you a lot of options to create truly flexible question banks that you can make sure that you have a valid assessment without taking as much time that is necessary to manually write all of those courses. And we talked about question banks. We've talked about the way to select those. So there's a lot of opportunities there for you to adjust things as you go through in those courses.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark. So still no more questions. So I hope we got everybody's anything you wanted to know and covered all of it for this Cypher Live. And thanks so much, and watch your inbox for the invitation for the next sessions.